Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're continuing the Tarot series. This is episode 4, and I have with me Silas, straight out of Benidorm. Isn't that right?
It is, yeah.
And how did you find those southern Spain airs? Let's say.
Oh, I always like it around that area. It's always quite nice, and yes, it's great. It's a great place to hike and do more active things. But of course, the rest of the British that were there mostly just drink, which I don't think would be. It's not a great place to drink alcohol,
No.
given the hot climate.
Yeah. Well, at least you had fun. So here we are, a new year. We continue this tarot series, and we had left off in the Chariot. That was the last card that we talked about. I don't know, before we move on, because we're following the Rider-Waite, before we move on to the Strength, which would be the Major Arcana number 8, do you have anything to add from any of the previous that may have evaded at the time?
No, I don't, but we should make a slight mention of, in the Rider-Waite as opposed to the Tarot de Marseille,
Right.
there is a change of order. I think that's worth discussing, I think.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can start there. So it's not just the Marseille. There were others as well that follow the same sequence, which would be that the 8th Major Arcana is Justice, and the 11th is Strength. And in the Rider-Waite, it was inverted to Strength being number 8 and Justice being number 11. I think this was, at least according to what is stated, this was done to correspond the astrological signs with the Major Arcana, correct? That was the main idea.
Yes.
Do you have any other interpretation? Could it also be have a different meaning behind this change from 8 to 11 and 11 8?
Well, it's the influence of the Golden Dawn primarily. I've made some notes here. Of course, Waite was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an esoteric organisation that developed its own system of tarot correspondences. The Golden Dawn associated Strength with Leo. Leo, ruled by the sun, embodies courage, strength, and mastery of the self. Justice with Libra. So Libra, ruled by Venus, embodies balance, fairness, and harmony. So in this sense, the kind of shutting up of the mouth of the lion is more closely aligned with, I guess, the alchemical stage of fermentation, which is where we see that both the male and the female, the red and the white, come together. They're becoming aligned. They're emerging into a union of the opposites. So in this sense, I think the Golden Dawn placed more, as you see in the Strength card, it places more emphasis on the feminine than it does the male. So I think that probably is the change there. Like what you mentioned as well, there's a change in terms of the astrology or the astronomy surrounding it. Also, some of the symbolic reasons was strength as an inner strength, rather than strength as an energetic principle, which it was previously. So Waite emphasized the inner moral strength represented by the Strength tarot card, aligning it with the gentle taming of the lion. He felt this resonated more with Leo's courageous and self-assured energy, and Justice as external order. He saw justice as representing an external laws, balance, and karma, aligning it with Libra's focus on fairness, harmony in the outer world. So this also appears, by the way, in the tarot, the other Crowleyan or Thelemite tarot decks of the Thoth tarot. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, and I know that the official, let's say, even naming is the Taming of the Lion, but I always saw her as opening the lion's mouth, not closing. First of all, first impression of the depiction is that she's opening the mouth of the lion and not closing, and also that this is related to the Sphinx, because if you notice the position, she is Virgo. I mean, wearing white and covered in roses, and she clearly seems to be a depiction of Virgo, and she sits where her posture is to the front of the lion. So the Sphinx would represent, the head of the damsel or the woman, right? And so the tail of the lion, the back of the lion, is protruded in this design. So I always saw these two associations. One was that instead of taming, she's probably opening the lion's mouth, so maybe awakening the lion from a stupor, which we saw sort of like those sphinxes in the Chariot, right? They were in a stupor of sorts, right? And sort of, not beaten down, but resigned to their fate, right? In a way, like, we volunteered for this, and it's perhaps not, it wasn't the best idea or something like that, That's the expression that I read in their depictions. But here it could be that the Virgo is, as you see, there's no more signs of civilization. So the previous Chariot civilization probably was taken down, or this is a new settling place or something like that. And she's awakening the lion so that it is able to, live in that context. I don't know if it makes any sense to you, but these are things that, always jumped to me. The first time that I looked at this card, I always thought she was opening the lion's mouth.
It's peculiar because the very Gnostic video game, series of video games called, firstly, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, but Elden Ring, and one of the endings to Elden Ring has you in this, as the player, you're in this same sort of, posture of prostration that we see with the lion, but there's, you also notice in the lion of the Strength Tarot card, there's a certain love in his eyes. Now again, she could be opening the lion's mouth. There's some form of regulation of the mouth, whether it's being opened or closed. This perhaps links to the feminine, and we see it with, of course, the priestess of water, this Sophian character who is the Logos. This perhaps would link to the Setian Gnostic idea of the Barbello, that she is the firstborn, she is a symbol of the prima materia, a symbol of the Logos, the word, some form of actionable or manifestable force. And we see as well, of course, the prostration of the lion is pretty exemplified by the tail, which is in between the legs, which of course would, like on a dog, is a symbol in ruminant animals of this sort of prostration. But you'll notice as well that it's interesting because the roses, the garland of roses, which somewhat in a sort of serpentine spiral reach up to her crown on the head, and then above that, of course, you have the infinite symbol, which is something we saw as well on the magician, but the magician was male. The rose itself is very much a symbol tied in with the incomprehensible, almost the ineffable colour that is above the purple or magenta chakra. In Hinduism, of course, that exists within Western esotericism as well. And this is the combining of the red of the male, or in this case Leo, with and the sun, and the white of the Luna, of the moon, of the feminine. The two of them together create the rosy pink. This is where you get the idea of the Rosicrucian from, the rosy cross. this rose or pink, which essentially is a placeholder colour, symbolises that which is above the crown. So in this case, that which is above the crown is the infinite. It's that which is at the centre of the pleroma, from whence everything emanated from. It also has this idea as well of the both the left and the right, the upper and the lower, constantly being emanated and arcing in operation with one another. But it will always contract back to that central monadic point. So it's, in many ways, you see the lion not look at her eyes, but actually look at this promise which is above even her, above the moon, above the you could say the cycles of oblivion, right, which the moon represents, these cycles of reincarnation. Another thing to mention as well is that the placement of the mountains is always a fascination throughout all of these various cards, where of course mountains lie. And you'll see this one. In fact, you're going to see the same thing in the Star Tarot card, and I also believe in the Temperance Tarot card as well. I think it somewhat appears in the Judgment Tarot card as well. The mountain will always be on the left-hand side. This, I think, ties us back in with the feminine principle. That the feminine principle in the Strength Tarot card, which, by the way, Boaz, that's what Boaz means in Hebrew, strength. That is the left pillar. So it links with this idea of severity, which is linked to the moon, which is linked to the idea of oblivion, or again, the cycles of reincarnation, the angels of oblivion, which is this metaphor which is cross-cultural, exists in Kabbalah, exists in Greco-Roman and Hellenic paganism. It exists all over. This idea that we are tricked into spiritual captivity. But that spiritual captivity itself, that spiritual involution, can provide us some sort of greater meaning for the profundity which we left, and we can thus get back to, if we take that suffering and spiritually rekindle it, so to say, which is of course what we see on the Fool's journey. That the Fool can either end where he began, or he can understand the world fully in its full totality, and of course break the cycle, to step off the carousel, so to say, the cosmic carousel.
Yeah, as you were exposing your views on that, something popped into my mind about it, which was in my presentation about the structure of the psyche. I have placed, of course, the essence at the top as the sort of projector of individuality for that particular individual, and the lion as, of course, been associated with the demiurge, sure, but also been associated with the ego, right? So the lion here could also, and this is just an alternative view of things, could also be the ego being either tamed, as you said, or being reawakened by an essence that has been able to finally reestablish connection to it. So finally be able to communicate with the lion of the ego again, given perhaps the change in context that we see in the rest of the cards. So they're now in the wilderness. You see forest, mountains, like you said, focused on the left side, well spotted. But so the context, the change in context, so the departure from that fake perception civilization of the chariot that even invented its own starry sky with the drapes, right? maybe the departure from it caused the essence to reestablish a long-lost connection to the ego, and basically make that sphinx, which would be, the ego connected to the essence. So the essence being, in this case, feminine, and, with the sign of the infinite, of course, symbolizing that it comes from the infinity, let's say. So it's the infinite individual, right? The infinite ray of individuality coming from whatever source, and connecting finally to the lion. So this was something that popped into my mind as you were, presenting your views, and I think it might also be an alternative interpretation, which doesn't invalidate any of the others, right? But it could also be that reawakening of the necessary ego to, be the decision maker, to be the filter, to be the one that, clears up the false memories, the false perceptions of the world that seemingly were established in the previous process, and that climaxed in the chariot at that point, right? With the false type of civilization, to which the egos, represented by the black and white sphinx, were subject to, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's also very reminiscent, and I'm pretty sure Jung spoke about the Strength Tarot card.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was in the Red Book. I think it was in the Red Book. It might have been in another work that he did. But he mentioned it directly, and he stated that the lion itself is almost symbolic of the shadow archetype, which is of course similar to Asterion taking on and I believe defeating the Minotaur within the labyrinth. Minos's Minotaur below his palace. So again, the taming of the lion is like what you're saying. It's this taming of the unkempt or unkept ego, rather. You also have this idea as well within, and I was writing about it recently, this idea of the green lion and overcoming the green lion, this raw primal force of nature, and then to pursue the Philosopher's Stone, or as an adjunct or a milestone in pursuing the Philosopher's Stone. There's also the idea as well, of course, of literally confronting Yaldabaoth, or confronting the Demiurge, or even this notion that the Demiurgos, Yaldabaoth, is subordinate to Sophia, in that sense. Again, it's all relating back to the true journey of the Gnostic, which is to emerge out of the egg, a child of the egg, to climb the fatal slope, hence the mountains, to then to question the dogma, to confront the limitations of the ego and the psyche imposed upon him.
Lift the veil, as usual.
Exactly, lift the veil, yes. Yeah. So it's all tied in with that. Again, linking back to alchemical fermentation, it involves fermentation involves the controlled breaking down of matter and the transmutation of it. So strength in this sense, as fermentation is very much so, is a very patient and gradual process which is guided. It's guided by an extraneous or external force, as we see within the Strength Tarot card, of course, right?
Yeah.
It's guided by the mother of matter. So, again, she permits that alchemical magnum opus to be unveiled. She brings both the harmony and the suffering to it. That one goes through Boaz, severity, strength, which also imparts this notion of the discharging of energy. And they use that to then understand, as a juxtaposition, to understand the greater power that is within, the introspective qualities of one's self,
Yes.
and the power of introspection.
Yes. I would also say, I've come to gradually reevaluate this idea that is very present, of course, in what is called Gnostic traditions. As you know, Gnosticism has been very much become a blanket statement for a lot of things that don't really belong. But about this idea of self-control as, the absolute end goal. And I've come to reevaluate that. And for example, looking at this card, I would say that there is, of course, a relationship, a clear relationship between the maiden and the lion, of course, mutual love and respect, a connection between them. But it's not necessarily, and this is why, perhaps this is why at first I didn't see it as a taming, but as a reawakening. Because there is a place for the lion. The lion has a function, has, a healthy place to manifest itself. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a lion. It would be something else, a tamer animal, right? An animal that is by nature tamer than a lion. So I think the lion is supposed to be a lion, but a healthy lion, not focused on false memories, not focused on false perceptions, but a lion that is actually, himself, let's say, able to be himself. And linking this to, again, the sphinxes that we saw in the chariot, those were really looking defeated, looking subordinate, looking even a bit slavish, right? They were slaves to that chariot, to that civilization. They had to carry it. Here it seems that it's like, intuitively, I see something else going on in the sense of not a self-control, not with the idea of self-control per se, in the sense of, I have this line that I have to, keep under check, but an idea of reawakening it, an idea of this is a part of me that has been missing all this time during the previous process, reaching up to here, and now I have to bring it out of the submission, and so he is still with the tail between his legs. So this is, like I said, an alternative way of interpreting it. He is still with the tail between his legs, but he is being awakened, like being lifted up. Imagine, for example, if you look again to the chariot, right? If you look back now to the chariot, you see that the posture could have been the previous posture of any, whether it was the black or the white one, could have been the posture that she is lifting this lion up from, right? In the sense of that miracle attributed to Jesus of the paralyzed man, right? Get up and walk. You remember that, right? Stand up and walk or something like that. So
yes.
It could be that it's a healing process in the sense of, okay, you've been through all this, but this is your healthy place. You are supposed to be a lion. You're not supposed to be, a kitty cat in the body of a lion, but you are supposed to be a lion. Of course, a healthy lion, a lion that is able to tell what is a lie from what is true, a lion that is able to, stand up for itself and stand up for what is necessary to maintain the integrity of the psyche, because it is clear that the lion here is performing a service to the maiden, and if the maiden is the essence, that would make perfect sense, you understand? So not self-control in the sense of actually muffling the lion down to a moldable energy, right? but of bringing it to the fore so that it can manifest in a healthy manner, because the lion is needed, unlike, of course, the cultural pressure that we've seen across time, right?
Absolutely, and some other things to mention upon that. And we had this juxtaposition with the chariot. If you look at the tails of the steeds that are being reined in to the chariot, their tails are outwards to their body. Of course, they're black and white as well, so they're not unified like the lion and the strength card. So they are external to their body, and implying that if we understand the tail to say be the Vav of the Yod-He, Vav-He, so it's this sort of serpent of the nous, this wand as well, which is similar to the nous principle, the mind. So in this, what it's representing in the chariot is the lower mind or nous or even ego in this sense is looking outwards externally. It's been tamed, but it's still looking outwards. But the tail is internal, it's in between the legs of the lion, implying that there's more introspection going on. You still get that prostration, you don't get as much prostration in the strength card, meaning that the lion is beginning to understand who and what it is. Another thing to mention as well about the strength card before we get on to the sort of astronomical matters regarding it is that I do apologise. I've lost. Oh no, pardon me. Yes, the green lion. So the green lion we see as a symbol associated with the black sun. I almost lost my train of thought there. So it's devouring the sun. It's something actually you see with the Erd tree within Elden Ring, if anyone's familiar with that game, where the Erd tree has literally become the sun. So it's this idea, and it's the same idea in Elden Ring, by the way, because Elden Ring is pure Gnosticism, that, and I use that term broadly, of course, that the conscious, the ego, the conscious and material ego is parasiting off the spiritual sun, the true sun, the esoteric sun. It has become the exoteric sun. It has blinded the oneself to it, to its power. And this is why, of course, we get the cultivation of the shadow archetype. So with the strength tarot card, what we're seeing, perhaps if she's, opening or closing the mouth of the lion, I would say closing, but let's assume closing for argument's sake.
Sure.
Then what we're seeing here is a total reversal of the green lion symbolism, devouring the sun, or the green lion, the raw primal energy of nature, the material ego, the conscious ego, devouring the unconscious, esoteric, spiritual sun. So that process is being done away with now. We're seeing a more, again, a coincidentia oppositorum, a conjunction of the opposites, a balancing out of the character. A transformation is taking place. So another thing to mention in terms of the astronomical and astrological ideas surrounding this card is, of course, if we look at the sequence of both the planetary genii and the zodiacal signs, strength is, and I think this is probably why they changed the sequence in the Golden Dawn, that it makes more sequential sense in terms of both Jungian psychology, but even just neo-esotericism, to have Leo and the Sun before, obviously, the Justice card, which I believe is Libra, and I forget the planetary genii of Libra now. It'll come to me when we get to the Justice
Venus?
card. Venus, I think it is Venus, yes. But, interestingly, within both astronomy and astrology, So Venus in Taurus, or literally the female in the earth, which is what Taurus represents. I've written this in my notes. Some astrologers connect the green lion to Venus's placement in Taurus, where it is said to be exalted. So of course what we see in the Strength Tarot card, this placement emphasizes Venus's connection to the earth, sensuality, and the natural world, which of course aligns with the green lion's symbolism, where the earth is exalted above the spirit. But in this Strength Tarot card, we see the reverse of that, or the beginning of the reversal of that. One thing to mention as well is that Leo is the 5th sign of the zodiac, which is of course the 5 is very much linked with this notion of the pentacle. So the 4 elements plus the 5th of the spirit, the unifying apex of the pyramid. Of course, all pyramids have 4 sides at their base, and that all goes to the Bennu stone, or the capstone. Of course, that links with the Bennu bird, the Ben stone rather. So the Bennu bird is the phoenix. It's this notion of from the ashes can spiritual fire be rekindled by suffering, by that which has come before. And I've stated as well, however, the green lion in alchemy is not directly associated with Leo. Instead, it represents a more primal, untamed force than the regal and solar line of Leo, which we see, of course, within the Strength Tarot card. It takes on its more regal appearance.
Yes.
It's becoming, again, more akin to the spiritual sun, as opposed to the raw, primal, untamed force of the green lion, which is a more
yes. And I would argue, coming from that perspective, I would argue that for the lion to become more regal and to become even more spiritual, because I do not subscribe to the notion that the green lion is per se unspiritual and entirely material. What it is a manifestation of an essential aspect of life here, let's say, of the goings on in the manifestation from the essence, but it becomes more regal, as you've stated and well stated, because it assumes itself. It admits to itself that it is a lion and not something else, and I, this may be just, as you know, I prefer intuitive interpretation, and this may be just my intuition going all over the place, but what I really do see is, that the lion is coming finally to itself. It is finally admitting and taking its rightful healthy place. It is probably, imagine a lion that has, for the entirety of the journey up to now, been told that it couldn't be a lion, that there was no place for a lion to exist in this reality. And this is basically the social pressure we see in against individuality and, that kind of thing. But now he understands. He is finally coming to understand that there is a healthy place, and therefore he is becoming healthy. Therefore he is becoming regal. Therefore he is coming to his natural self. And going again back to the chariot where we saw the sphinxes there, the sphinxes weren't only a lion. They were a lion with the damsel mixed in, and they were subservient, right? But here there is now again a sort of, not necessary separation because they are connected, but a sort of you have this place and I have this place. You understand? You have this function in the psyche, let's say, as the ego, as the lion, as the as I used to say, the king in the throne room, right? And I have my place as sort of the goddess above you, right? And we are both connected, and together we will set the psyche straight. At least that is the hope. Doesn't necessarily mean that it will automatically become that, but there is a hope that now they can straight up what was previously false or previously incorrect, because the entirety of I think the entirety of the issues with the human world come from perception that stems from false memories, and that is what skews the healthy place and generates the shadows, and then the shadows manifest as an oppositional force to be dealt with, right? And for that you need a decision maker, which is the lion, and the lion is working on behalf of the damsel, which would be the essence, the infinity damsel, right? Mm-hmm. the white queen, if you like, the white goddess that lives in the infinity. For the Sethians, as you said, Barbello, sure, whatever representation you prefer, in that sense, in the mythological sense. But here, as an archetypal force, it would be the essence, right? The essential individual manifestation at its purest, without yet, the physicality per se, right? And so the lion is the beginning of physicality, and he is supposed to be the ruler of physicality, the regulator, the decision maker, the filter. And he's the one that's supposed to know what should be written in law. And that is another concept that comes from religions that has been skewed, right? Which is the idea of, what types of laws are supposed to be written in stone. Written in stone here would mean written in the memory room of the psyche, right? And when I say memory room, of course, you've watched that presentation I made, but what I mean to say is there are things that we take as certainties, regardless if they are true or false. Many of the things that we take for certain are false. So, but we write them in stone anyway. We, store them in the memory room of our psyches as if they were absolute truths. And these absolute truths generate behaviors from not only the ego but the mental characters that go in accordance with them, with the maintenance of those laws. And those laws have to be revisited. They have to be reevaluated. And for that, we need someone as strong as the lion. You understand? Someone as regal, as self-assured, self-confident as the lion. And after revisiting those false memories, he is supposed to be the one choosing which laws now go to take their places, right? The places of the ones that were revisited. So in that sense, it would be like sorts of, in a metaphorical way, religiously shattering the tablets of the commandments, right? So the lion shattering the commandments that he reevaluated as being false memories to allow space for new laws to be written, which do not necessarily mean they will be entirely true, right? But it's a process of gradual approximation towards self-knowledge.
Yes. And another thing to mention about this all as well is that it's interesting that they chose strength as the title. Mm-hmm. And this somewhat links, of course, with what you're saying. All of this does, really. And that, of course, this is the 8th card. And strength, of course, is 8 words long. I believe the ordinal value of strength is 111, which is, of course, the Trinity. 1 + 1 + 1. Of course, in the Trinitarian doctrine, that equals 1. To everyone else, that would equal 3. So the Tria Prima. Boaz as well, which is of course strength in the Hebraic or Kabbalistic idea, but the Hebraic language as well. That is Bet, Ayin, and the Zayin. So it's 3 letters long, right? Which is, of course, it's all very interesting. It's linking back to this idea of the Tria Prima. So again, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That is in alchemy, sulfur, mercury, and salt. So sulfur would be the Father, God. To the right, you have Jesus, the Son of Man. That would be salt, and then, of course, to the other side, the Holy Spirit would be mercury. So sulfur is the masculine principle. It is the conscious principle. It is the drive for individuation, the ego. Like what you're saying, this is an essential part of the spiritual journey. You need it. You require it. So there's this certain primal dynamism to it. It has a will to create. It has a will itself, a very strong will. Like the sun's energy, its heat, its outward expression, its radiance. But the radiance, like the sun, as we see on the zodiacal wheel and what have you, it is blind. It is a blind and scattershot dynamism and radiance. So in that sense, you require Mercury, the feminine principle, the nurturing principle, to limit it. This is why the female is linked to severity and to judgment on the left-hand side, like Boaz. It is it's passive, it's fluid, it's again, it's the unconscious intuition, the capacity for transformation. So Mercury, like the properties of the metal itself, the only liquid metal at room temperature, it is glistening. It has that cold, metallic structure to it, yet on the outside of it, it glistens almost incandescently. Again, like the spirit itself, like perhaps if one was to visualize it, primordial chaos. Right, so primordial chaos can be something which is both, receptively structural. It is of order, but of course it can also, or it can establish order. That is, if it's controlled, if it's provided some sort of driver. But it's also of a radical transformative power as well. So it's like the fluidity of water. And there's this idea as well within water, with the reflection of one's self, that one through the transformative aspects of nature, through, I guess you could say, the suffering of transformation, imbued within nature, there's a certain reflection that can be incurred from that, which can be either terrible or good.
Yes.
It can either establish the inverse, the shadow aspect of oneself, or it can establish the union of it. And then, of course, we have salt, the third principle, which is the union of opposites. This is the Son of Man. And salt is the earth. It is the combining, the heros gamos, the chemical wedding between these two opposite yet mutually interdependent forces. It's a harmonious blend between them. So, this is where you get the divine hermaphrodite, or the rebus, the double matter, from Latin. So it's, again, there's psycho-spiritual qualities to it. There's also qualities of systems theory. This idea of the system itself, the cosmogony itself, is built upon these truths. It's the same idea that you see within the Splendor Solis. It's the reasoning behind that quote, and I use it quite a lot. Est in Mercurio Solis, quod querunt. And that literally means and Mercury's sun is that which the wise seek. And what they mean by Mercury's sun is like what we see in this Strength Tarot card, where Mercury takes the precedent over the sun, or the transformative quality of Mercury takes precedent over the dynamism. The both are combined in a Hieros Gamos, and it is that which the wise seek. It's that which produces the quaternity of the crucifix, right? You have the Tria Prima at the top.
I'm sorry to interject, but for sure that the balance between female and male is absolutely essential, and for sure that in this card, the female is, I mean, if whether or not she is a representation of the essence, as I see it, is taking precedence. So absolutely agreed. She, in my view, is releasing the male. So the male seems to, like I said, have been stuck in a false paradigm, and the essence reestablishes connection and releases it, being by closing or opening the mouth doesn't matter to me that much in that regard, but awakens the male. And also I would like to comment that what you've impeccably said, I would like to add that the mirroring qualities of Mercury mean that, of course, the mirror of reality is made up of Mercury, metaphorically, right? So Mercury is the mirror that reflects back at the psyche, be it the glorious radiance, be it the shadow. Depends on what false memories or true memories you've been focusing on or allowing to be regulated by in your psyche, right? But the Mercury has that mirroring capability, and that's why alchemy tries to convert not necessarily lead into gold, but mercury into gold, right? So to transform the mirror image into the glorious, self-knowing essence, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. It's also as well, I mean, this appears in Bowie's Black Star, and I just bring this up because synchronistically, I'm at this point, this literal point where you see this thing, this sort of dreamlike fraction. Again, it's very mercurial, right? The scene that's depicted, and of course it's the white and the black. So again, I'm at this point in the Black Star, Bowie's Black Star video, where you see the almost transformation from the chariot, the black and the white, sort of, I guess you could call them, sort of vibrating, frenzied dancers, moving over, of course, to the sort of Strength Tarot card, this closer union between the two opposing forces. Yeah. Another thing to mention as well, and I agree with you. All of this is, in terms of Mercury, it's more of the unconscious aspect. And again, this is why it links to Sophia, because Sophia has a closer connection, again in Gnosticism, it has a closer connection to the Pleroma, as opposed to Yaldabaoth, who was very much resigned to the Kenoma, which is the abyss or the void, the emptiness, as opposed to the Pleroma, which is the fullness. So Sophia has more of that connection to the higher. She's the bridge between the two, even in the Gnostic creation myth. So this is why Mercury is associated with the unconscious, which itself is essentially synonymous with the spirit or the spiritual. Yeah. As opposed to, of course, the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, the lion-headed Hierophant, the Leon to Eddies, or the Leon to Cephalene. That symbol, that great purveyor of time, of course, within the consciousness, the purely conscious. But yeah, I agree. You still require that. And of course, what we're speaking about here is in many ways, it's archetypes, isn't it? So
yes, absolutely, yeah. And the subconscious, to me, is more conscious than the what is called the conscious, because the conscious is based upon subconscious foundations. So if the conscious to manifest requires, delving into the subconscious for its foundation, it means that the subconscious is necessarily more aware than the actual conscious, if you understand my meaning, right? So the subconscious holds more of what is foundationally observable, even if in a chaotic manner, so not organized, okay, but it holds more than the actual conscious. What the conscious does is give it a meaning, put a story on it, right? Give it a form, let's say, but it holds less than the subconscious. So I always, invert the two. I always consider that the subconscious is actually the conscious, even though more chaotic, and the conscious is actually sub, which means below, subconscious, right? But that's just a detail of mine. But I view it that way.
One way to visualize that as well, if we understand the conscious, or what you stated, the subconscious, I guess, in that sense. It takes the unconscious, which is the pure the pleroma, the fullness of the white light, right? The fullness of all potentiality, all colour, all hues. And of course, as we see on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album artwork, it goes through that upward pointing triangle, which is very symbolic, of course, of the male. And you see this within the hexagram. It's the womb, or the downward pointing triangle, the chalice, intertwined with the upward pointing triangle, which is the male, the conscious. Again, like I think you mentioned it was very good analogy, where you stated it's like the tip of the sword, and it cuts ribbons out of the potential.
Yeah.
So it literally bifurcates. It's a symbol or a tool of bifurcation, and very much so. I mean, the mercury, or the, like what you're saying, the unconscious, the greater potentiality seen within the feminine in Sophia. It certainly can produce a lot more, or it has more to offer, because it is from that literal source of all potentiality, very directly. Another thing to mention as well is that what we see within the Rider-Waite tarot deck is actually quite close to, I think they've taken a lot of cues from the Bible. So you see within the book of Ruth, the character of Boaz, and usually within the Septuagint, there's different ways it's spelled within the various Septuagints. One interesting way is ZZ, which is the abbreviation, which puts, makes you wonder, where the hell did ZZ Top get their name? But anyway,
and it's also used to describe sleep, right? In a pictographical manner, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So this is how the Greeks abbreviated it. So it's you're very much correct. It's like they're unconscious in a sense, which somewhat links to what we see within Genesis. And I wrote something within the Discord server recently, but we won't go into that. Anyway, Boaz marries Ruth. So Boaz in the context means, of course, strong, or in him is strength. So there is the potential for strength, not that he is strong, but in him is strength. And Ruth, I believe, from the Hebrew word reut, which means friend or companion, someone you would take on a journey with you, someone who's there constantly by your side, like Grace, almost. And that's what you see in Elden Ring as well.
Yeah.
You can accept right at the beginning, once you go through 3, the checkpoints in the game essentially are these, you've got to kindle the fire at these stops, which are called stops of lost grace. And you kindle the fire at the lost grace, and after 3 of them, you're approached. Once you kindle 3, of course, a symbolic number, you're approached by your, I forget her name now, but she's a sort of feminine companion, which she intermittently will guide you through the journey, throughout the lands of in between. So, or the lands between, rather. So it's very much similar to what we see within the Book of Ruth, right? In this sense, you have in him his strength, and you have Ruth, which is the friend or the companion. And anyway, she's working and toiling in the field, and again, like the Empress, similar to the Empress. And after a while, you know, not meaning to cut to the to spoil it, just to cut to the chase here, he marries her. So there's a Heros Gamos within that story as well. And I mean, of course, this links to Solomon's Temple and all of that as well with Boaz. But I found it very interesting that you see the same parallels in the Bible. Of course, it's of no real surprise, simply because all of these revealed religions are merely metaphor parables of astrotheology.
And of the same source. Yeah,
exactly, of a perennial truth.
They're blueprints. So, they're blueprints of the same source that already mixes some truth with some skewed falsehoods, and that always try to literalize the symbolic, which removes its value. So absolutely, they all stem from the same types of source. At least they're all blueprints. I agree.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, you could use a lot of what we're discussing here, and in fact, you could use the tarot deck itself and establish a new religion. I mean, that's
yes.
because they're all essentially interchangeable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, funny, but it is true. Yeah, it could be done. Absolutely could be done, because the archetypes are all there, and the symbology is all there, and all you need to do is skew a little bit, add some details, and you would get a new religion for sure. Yeah, for sure.
I might do that on my day off, actually. Just start a new religion.
I heard it pays well.
Yeah, I've heard as well. Hubbard got it correct, man.
Anyway, so after the strength, so be it the ego being tamed or the ego being awakened, in my opinion, it's awakened. And it's something like I always say, I also base it a lot in my personal experience. And in my personal experience, it is an awakening of the ego that is necessary. But in any case, after that, we move to the card number 9, the Hermit. Now, the Hermit is one of perhaps the most, iconic cards, perhaps together with the Tower and the Wheel, not the Wheel of Fortune, the World, right? One of the most iconic and recognizable of the tarot cards, where, you see a sort of Gandalf figure holding a staff, wearing all gray, old man, carrying a lantern that holds a star. And of course it's a 6-pointed star, and it's very radiant, and it's strapped inside of that cage for his illumination. And of course it can be argued whether that is his internal star that he externalizes to be observed, or if that is some of the light of the essence coming from above, let's say, that he was able to capture somehow in order to illuminate his path. But in any case, what is your first impressions then on the Hermit?
Yeah, so the lantern, if you look at the Splendor Solace plate 10, you see this very you could almost see parallels with the idea of the Gorgon of Medusa being beheaded by Perseus. And within plate 10 you have the dismembered body, white body, and the swarthy barbarian. So you have the white and black there, that distinction, carrying the golden head. So it's very much akin to this breaking down of the individual, of the four elements of the individual, and of course their psychic or archetypal elements, to find that part of oneself which is of a higher inclination, that cannot be subdivided down, that cannot be necessarily destroyed.
The true self. Yeah.
The true self, yes. So in that sense, the lantern is the head. The lantern is that part of oneself which is the esoteric sun that was previously ingested by the green lion, by the more primal aspect of oneself within that spiritual exile, that spiritual amnesia, that spiritual captivity. And it's being exuded out through these, let's be honest, very violent processes of inner alchemy. So that is being enclosed. You see that in Bowie's Black Star, by the way. They take the woman takes the head, who has the lion's tail, takes the head of the astronaut or Asterion Nautes, literally from Greek or ancient Greek, the sailor of the stars, implying that we are, of course, voyagers from to this place. This place is not our home. We've journeyed here from somewhere else. That sort of idea, that we're more of a cosmic nature rather than a terrestrial nature.
Absolutely,
in our truest sense. So it's implying that. She takes it to the three monoliths upon the hill. So you're seeing the same notions again within Bowie's Black Star, but the Hermit, obviously linking as well to Hermes, to Mercury itself, which is the Roman equivalent. This idea of knowledge, of Thoth as well within the ancient Egyptian pantheon, with the ibis bird. Of course, the ibis is that bird which scours the swamps, looking for, and it only eats these little morsels, and it's scouring for these little pearls of sustenance throughout this grand and rather morass swamp, for these morsels, or it's like a swine within the mud looking for the pearls that have been cast before it. So very similar as well to what you see in the Bible, this idea of the serpent, or in this essence the mind, or the mercury, the more unconscious aspect of oneself, the psyche or the nous, was cursed to go on his belly for the rest of his days, as opposed to all other animals. So he was, again, it was to what the metaphor, the surrounding metaphor of that is that the mind is within a place of terrestrial suffering or terrestrial pain, of perhaps a misapprehension or an amnesia, and it must rekindle, relight, hence the lantern in the Hermit's case, that spiritual fire which will illuminate the way. You see with the Hermit as well, of course, the staff in the left hand, that is, in this sense, lower than the lantern, which is above it in the right hand. So the staff is that of it's the bridge, it's the valve, it's the serpent, it's the tree, it's the nous, the psyche, it's the connection between the upper and the lower, like what we see for the magician. In this sense as well, the ego. That is carried very firm and strong, as we can see with the hermit's hand clasped around it. You can see as well it's clasped around it at the top, implying that the journey is almost complete. He's of a more higher nature, almost now, and that is in the right. So that is that which is established, but the lantern from our perception is to the left, which is again that which is being born, the mercury, severity, transformation, judgment, that which is being brought in or brought forth from the morass of that swamp. You also notice as well, the hermit is upon the peak of the mountain. I believe it is. Again, that's my interpretation. The snow-covered peak. This implies, again, like what we see with Orpheus, this notion that in hell or Hades, hell with one L, of course, the Norse idea of it, is a very cold place. This is why, again, with Mercury, which is in room temperature, usually is a liquid. And I believe it's anything below freezing. I forget the freezing temperature of Mercury. I think it is just below freezing, so 0 or -1. It then freezes, so it goes into a stasis. Hence why one could say Hades or hell or Niflheim is another place of this, a place of cold, miserly torment, like our own world, right? In many ways, or many one could critique it as. So he is at the peak of that. He is almost to the heavens, if you will. He's almost escaped it. You notice as well that he is clothed, almost like Saturn, and he's an old man. He's taken on the Jungian archetype of the Senex, which again means old man. So he's become very, very wise with age, if you will. And the hooded aspect, like Saturn, implies the chthonic archetype, the chthonic element, the chthonic aspect of the Senex, the chthonic aspect of oneself. But in a deeper sense, it links to this idea of the tree. So to understand the tree, to understand the Mercury, the drive and transformative unconscious, again, hence the chthonic aspect, the subterranean, the darkness, the unconscious driver of the tree with sprouting forth from the seed. Not necessarily the seed, but the force, the driving blueprint which springs forth from it, or drives that growth forward, can only be found introspectively, or can only be found within the unconscious, right? It can't be found externally to oneself. And of course this is further implied by his closing of the eyes, which as well, you see within the Garden of Eden. It's actually the serpent which explains to Adam, well, to Eve first actually, that, again, very interesting, it's Eve first that she mentions this to, and this links with the Lover tarot card as well, and of course what we're discussing with in terms of Mercury. The snake mentions to Eve first that is actually Yahweh Elohim, or Yahweh the God, who is again the Janus, the janitor, the gatekeeper of Eden or paradise, the great abundant plain. That he is lying about, certainly physically, not, again, the Hebrew word is for physical death, not spiritual death, that it is a lie that they will certainly die if they eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good or evil. And then later on, it states that their eyes were opened once they ate from that fruit, implying that they were dead previously, which is of course what a lingering corpse does. Their eyes close. And then later on we of course read that Yahweh Elohim, the reason that he did not want them to eat from the tree is not because he didn't desire them to, he wanted them to forgo spiritual death and to be immortal, yet, not in this sort of spiritual involuted state.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The fact was that he wanted to monopolize all power and to maintain that monopoly, because he states at the end of Genesis 3, of course, that they will become like us. He doesn't say like him, he says like us, which of course implies this idea of either henotheism or polytheism. And interestingly as well, throughout the Hebrew of that passage, and this I'll tie this back into the Hermit, it always mentions Yahweh Elohim after Genesis 1. So Genesis 2, Genesis 3, it's constant Yahweh Elohim. However, when the serpent mentions to Eve that, you will not die, the reason he's lying to you is because he does not want you to be like Elohim, not Yahweh Elohim, which implies, of course, with the verbs as well, the verbs are all plural. What it's actually saying is that the serpent tells Eve, he does not want you to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good or evil, because he does not want you to be like the gods, to know like the gods, to have your eyes opened like the gods.
Yes.
Which is the literal Hebrew. It's the verbs are all plural. Of course, Elohim is plural as well. So it's not used in the singular, majestic, plural sense, as it's called. And then right at the end, he mentions that they'll become just like us if we also allow them to eat from the fruit of the tree of life. So
yes.
There's another biblical link there with the closing of the eyes. You also see that in I Pet Goat 2 with the Christ figure and his eyes are shut. Again, he's going through that very alchemical and transformative, transmutational sort of inner work, magnum opus. But yeah.
Well, your symbolic depictions, or let's say explanations, are always top notch. So I always appreciate you bringing that to the table, because it's something that is really fascinating. My reading of these cards, and even like I said, in sequence with the previous ones, and in sequence with the intuitive, my intuitive reading of the previous cards, is that, okay, so you've had the awakening of the lion, and of course the lion is a symbol, an archetypal symbol. Of course, he's not a physical lion, nothing like that. And so now we see here the lion has taken ownership, and of course I also link this to as being the true Hierophant, right? So we had a false Hierophant or Pope, right? In the previous sequence, where we had one pretending to be spiritual, but not, it was all external. It was all an external manifestation of spirituality. And now you have the true Hierophant, or in this case, the lion, the ego, in his throne room. And now you say, but the throne room is cold and desolate. Well, I think that the depiction there is like if you're at the top of Mount Olympus, so at the top of the psyche, the physical psyche, because above you is the essence. So it's no longer so. As I've presented in my psyche presentation about the virtual realities, the ego stands in between, at the frontier, in between the conscious and subconscious, or the other way around, like I like to depict it. So he is at the top of the psyche. He is at the lonely place on the mountain, where he has to sort of capture the light of the essence to figure out what to decide in regards to his law. And of course, here law, I'm talking about not only the foundational memories that will reside in the subconscious, but also the disciplines that this ego is going to apply onto his mental characters, which would be, of course, in a metaphorical sense, his subjects, right? Or his disciples, if you prefer, right? So first he has to be alone in the mountain, be himself, right? And by himself in the mountain, in the cold isolation, looking at the light, the captured light of the essence, to realize who he is supposed to be, in the sense of, okay, supposed to be could be taken in the wrong way, but I think you understand, in the sense of the true self, right? Who is the true self supposed to be in his case? So as he looks and he observes this, and that light also keeps him somewhat, illuminated and warm in that cold isolation, he is able to discern as the true Hierophant, so no longer the false Hierophant, but the introspective Hierophant, to discern what is correct from what is incorrect, what is true from what is false, right? And then cascade it down as quote-unquote law, right? Or memory room material, cascade down to the mental personalities that will be generated in that psyche. So I really think that this depicts this necessary lonely nature as a stage. Of course, this is nothing of these cards represent a permanence, right? It's all a continuous motion of stages. So at this stage, he requires to be alone in the cold isolation, looking at himself in that light of the essence, and saying, for example, regarding a context, saying no. The decision in alignment to this light of the essence is this one and not that one. And then that, some a thought might emerge of, but that will disturb, or it will, make, some people angry at you. But regardless, this is in accordance to the light of my essence. I will not decide against who I am. I will decide in accordance to who I am. And if that causes disturbance, that means that it's, first of all, it's outside of his responsibility, because he's only responsible for that psyche. But secondly, that is because they haven't done their reawakening inside of them, right? So they are disturbed by a decision that is not theirs, right? They are disturbed by what someone else decides that has nothing to do with their own psyche. And of course, the interconnectivity of all the psyches is a fact, and the need for interaction with the other is a fact. But for that to occur in an organic way, and for true magic of this place, of this reality, because reality isn't only the cold hell depicted by the demiurgic kind of sects or beliefs. It also has the warmth, it also has the beauty, right? It also has the very spirit inculcated into it, right? We just have to change the perception and be ourselves. So to be able to interact with the others and interact with the very nature, the organic nature, we first need to be in accordance with ourselves, and not in accordance with false laws, false memories, right? False foundations. And so this is the importance of the Hermit card, in my opinion. He's making that distinction. He is choosing, first discerning, and then choosing in accordance with who he essentially is, which is represented by that light in the lantern. In my opinion, at least, like I said, it's my intuitive reading of it.
No, that's certainly what it is, yeah. It's the same with, of course, as I mentioned, the Splendor Solace, plate 10. It's the same sort of symbolic depiction, where again, one takes that essence of the true self, that it could even be in a fragmentary state. Again, it's something that it can't really be, it's ineffable, it's indescribable, but it's something that's powerfully felt. Again, this is really the basis of faith, and why faith is so powerful even to the rational mind, because it's an inner certainty of you know, of a powerfully felt yet unseen force. Again,
I would just say, sorry, just a quick interjection. I would say that you can replace faith with trust. I think it works better. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, that it can be based around knowledge, the trust as well, like what you're saying, or the faith, and it's something that's experiential, and this is what all various mystery schools, be them, you know, of the Kabbalistic persuasion or not, they all understand that the greatest knowledge of all is one that is not found theoretically, one that is not gleaned from books, but the books merely act as keys by which one, through experiential actionable knowledge, pierces or transverses that threshold of potential. Another thing to mention as well, and I wish Cubstar was here, but
oh yeah, I forgot to mention Cubstar was supposed to be here, but he felt a bit ill, so we have to skip another episode without him, but probably the next one. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting card, because with the Hermit, and you brought up the Hierophant, so I've made a listing of pretty much the entire tarot deck, and both its planetary genus and its zodiac sign, of course, you know, juxtaposed, just to see if there's any reflections. Of course, as we mentioned, Taurus or Venus within Taurus is found within the Hierophant card. So it's, again, that's where Venus is exalted. We're mentioning the Green Lion. It's very much the Green Lion is astrotheologically or astrologically synonymous with, again, Venus and Taurus, which is the idea that Mother Nature takes precedent, right?
Yes.
Again, the material essence takes precedent. The Hierophant is the false hermit.
Yes.
Right? Or the Hierophant is almost the pure, the youthful archetype of the later Hermit, which is the Senex. And of course, the Hermit has Virgo with Mercury, the zodiac sign Virgo in Mercury, rather. So that has this notion of, you know, the exaltation of not the material, but rather Mercury or the unconscious aspect. So the spirit takes precedent, even though one is far more lonely on that mountain. But the mountain is real, rather than the Hierophant's throne, which is artificial. And of course, he's surrounded by others. He's venerated by them, revered by them. The Hermit takes the lonelier, yet higher path, the true path, if you will, that one must tread. Another thing to mention, of course, as well, is that you know, Virgo's Mercury is a far more inward sign. It's one that's within modern astrology. It's analytical. It's you it's focused on this spiritual refinement as well. Again, it embodies introspection and self-reflection.
The seeking of perfection. That's how usually Virgo is, depicted.
Exactly.
Trying to perfect everything that is connected to that particular energy. So in Mercury it would be thought or mind, but in other fields, wherever Virgo energy is manifested, it is the idea of perfecting, making it perfect, whatever it is. So yeah, go on.
And another thing to mention as well is that in astrology, Virgo is associated with what is called the 6th house. And again, it governs multiple things, but primarily work. So there's a practicality to the entire thing. Again, practicality or experiential knowledge are all connected. And interestingly as well, with the 6th house, you also have the Hermit, which is the 9th card. The 9 is, as we've mentioned, again, if the 6 is descent, this spiral of descent, this section of the spiral of descent, which 6 embodies, the 9 is the opposite of that, is a section of the ascent, the ascent back up. Another thing we could mention too is that so the 6 and the 9 is obviously the hexagram too. The 6 also links with the cube, or the hewn stone, which is quite Masonic.
Yeah.
But again, you take that jagged stone, you use both the square to perfect the lower mind, and of course the body as well, the infernal aspects of oneself, to thus provide a good foundational block, a pillar, to thus rest the Hermit upon, which does the more supernal work, or the work of bringing out the supernal, which is of course representative of the compass, which measures the circle, which creates the perfect smooth circle, the heavenly.
And that pillar could arguably be a representation of that connection that at least I was talking about. The connection between the lower mind of the mental personality and the higher, spiritual essence of the essence, right? So the pillar unites earth to the sky, right? That's the whole idea of a vertical, line, if you like. And so if the Hermit is at the top, he is in that peak of the mountain, as you've said in the beginning. He is in that cold place because it's colder, right? Colder there, observing the light of the essence and making that discernment and making the tough decisions that will need to be applied for his journey. I would agree entirely with what you're saying, and even add that pillar might be a representation of the connection. Of course, there are many interpretations that can be given to the pillar. Of course, it's the phallus of Osiris. It's all of these things that religiously, in my opinion, have been introduced as literalizations of something symbolic. Yes. But the pillar itself, being a vertical line, seems to me to be the connection. In the same way, for example, when you described, I don't know if it was in this series or in some other conversation, but you described as the symbol of Pisces having one Pisces is going vertically, one fish is going vertically, and the other one is going horizontally, right? So the one that's going vertically is that connection between the lower and the upper, right? And the one that's going horizontally is that connection between, the left and right. So you could even say male, female, the two opposites of duality, whatever, right? And when you put the two together, it makes up a cross, right? And so in the age of Pisces, you had the cross as the major symbol, the major religious symbol, of course. No offense to all the other religions that have different symbols, but in the process that we're talking about, in terms of this worldwide, call it cabal, call it collection of druids, whatever you want to call them, that this was the symbol chosen for the domination, let's say, of that age, right? And even through this sign you shall conquer, right? And so the uniting of the vertical connection with the left and right stems, however, from an organic process that was then skewed and used in a nefarious way. And that organic process is exactly stand at the top of the cross, right? Or be in the cross if you prefer. And from there, you're able to evaluate who you are. And you're in between all these forces and able to discern who you are and decide accordingly. And I think that this is key. That's why I'm reiterating, because this is a key understanding in this particular step of the journey that we're describing right now in the tarot. And I do, of course you do as well, but I do see the tarot as absolutely a journey, a depiction of a journey, internal, archetypal, metaphorical journey, but still a journey.
Well, we'll also tying this in as well, like what you're saying, he is atop the cross. Mm-hmm. Another thing to mention on the ends of the Piscean constellation. So you have consistently on the vertical and horizontal axes of that constellation, you will always have, so you have the one right at the, that point of bifurcation between the vertical and the horizontal fishes, or the wings of the constellation. You'll have one star, and then you'll have 3 stars. On the vertical it's 3 stars going up, and then on the horizontal it's 4 stars. Yep. So again, you have the 3 and the 4, which is found within the rebus too. Again, that's the tria prima, like what we were mentioning: sulfur, mercury, and salt.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I just hit my microphone here. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Sulfur, mercury, and salt combined, of course, with the 4 elements, which is in alchemy, of course, fire, air, earth, and water. So those combined produce the double matter, right? Mm-hmm. Again, the chemical wed and the hieros gamos. But interestingly, on the vertical, you have a Pythagorean, almost a perfect Pythagorean triangle between 3 stars there, and then on the other one you have almost a perfect, I guess you could call it a polygon of some description. It looks like a trapezoid shape, and that is comprised of 5 stars. The 2 together, of course, create the 8. But interestingly, on the vertical, which is more in line with the Hermit, you have those 3 stars, which is, of course, the almost, as I mentioned, the almost perfect right-angled triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That idea, or again, the dialectic, right? Yeah. Another thing to mention as well is that in the Piscean age, and you mentioned the Latin, with in this under this sign ye shall conquer. Mm-hmm. Just to get the Latin for that, in hoc igno vinces or vinces.
Vinces.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So under this sign, or by this sign, thou shalt conquer. It's interesting because in the Piscean age, and what we see with for example, the Piscean fish, and they almost circle each other like perhaps the alchemical Ouroboros, of which is double in figures, in terms of you have at the bottom the wingless drake or wyvern, and at the top, and of course that is eating the tail of the of the winged dragon at the top, who wears the crown, who in turn is eating the tail of the lower. So you have this Ouroboros structure, of course, very similar to the Piscean illustrations of the fish, who are circling one another. But in essence, it's like one is going lower and one is going upper. So during the Piscean age, right at the end, it's become more pronounced, I think. Those who wish to, if you will, exit the cosmic carousel to go higher, like the Hermit, they are doing so.
Yes.
And those who are going lower are very much, accelerating their descent.
They're more in the mud than ever. Yes.
Yeah, so it's like what you see with Yuval Noah Harari, what he was saying in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, where it will become almost a biological, he doesn't say it, but he pretty much implies it, that there'll be a spiritual and intellectual distinction and inequality between both the lower and the lower echelons and the upper echelons of the global civilization, as he calls it. So you'll have the obsolete Homo sapiens, and which interestingly means the wise man, which wisdom is something linked to the right hand side within on the Sephiroth, Chokmah, linked to the male, the masculine, and then you have the Homo Deus, the god men. Interestingly, that might have some sort of connection as well with the strength, where the female, or the left-hand side of understanding, is closing the mouth of Chokmah, or wisdom, on the right-hand side, the male aspect. Another thing we could mention as well is, of course, throughout all of these tarot cards, do you notice, and we're mentioning about the upper and the lower, heaven and earth, the infernal and supernal, all of this. Do you notice all of the Roman numerals have both an upper vertical, horizontal line rather, and a lower horizontal line? Yeah. And you'll always have these very primal or primordial geometric shapes of course, the X and the V, which themselves are downward and also upward facing triangles, and the I, the straight line. And none of them seem to, of course, because it only goes up to 22, none of them deviate from that. I think there's some sort of symbolism in that too. But yeah, another thing to mention as well, just before we get off this card, is that you can actually tell all of the cards as feminine or masculine in the zodiacal sense. In the zodiacal sense, I stress that. Bar, of course, everything before the Emperor, vis-a-vis the background colour of the cards. So, for example, in the Hermit, we see the day, or the sort of silvery grey sky, which is, of course, insinuating or conveying that the Hermit is a feminine card, as opposed to what we saw preceding the Hermit, which was the Strength card, which is zodiacally associated with Leo. It had a yellow background. It was of the day, as opposed to, of course, the grey of the night. You see as well the recurring, or the recurrence rather, of the icy, cold mountains, which we saw in the Fool tarot card.
Yes.
But of course, the Fool was at eye level or below those mountains. Now the Hermit is higher than it. So you see that distinction as well between the Jungian archetypes of, again, the poor, or the P-U-E-R, or the child, the youth, and the Senex, the old man.
Yes, the Fool was about to dive into, even though not aware of it, but dive into the abyss, while the Hermit has climbed atop of the of those mountains that perhaps we saw in the Fool, and he's contemplating downward, even though with his eyes closed, but he's looking downward. His countenance is looking downwards and maintaining the equilibrium through the staff.
Yes.
So the staff, ensures that he's vertical while doing that, which is also a symbol by itself. So I completely agree with you there. I'm sorry, conclude. That was just...
Yeah, the staff as well, the mind supports that journey.
Mhm.
The reflection there as well. The hermit looks down, the fool looks up.
Yes.
So you see that distinction there, which of course itself is an inversion, because if he is of a more heavenly or vertical nature, then why is he looking down? Why is he looking towards the earth? Well, he's doing that because he's at the end of the Gnostic's journey, or at least terrestrial journey, in understanding the environment. He's climbed the fatal slope, which of course is a very isolating
he's looking down because
position.
that is what he's going to regulate. His disciples are down there. So his disciples are, quote unquote, the fools, in the sense that inside our psyche, the hermit is the one, and again, this is a stage, is the one that when he arises in the psyche, he regulates the mental personality. So he is the wise man of the ego, making the decisions in accordance to the star that he holds in his lantern, and according with the verticality of the staff. So the staff keeps him balanced and keeps him, vertical and perfectly aligned with that verticality. And one of the things, as you know, it's been a recent emergence of the debate about simulation theory, and which I view as a literalization of something symbolic, because I don't think that nature is literally a simulation. Of course, it can be interpreted that way. I mean, we can interpret whatever, and we see the most sometimes absurd interpretations of things that seem obvious to other people, right? We have several examples of that, especially nowadays. But to experience the organic reality with all that it entails, with the good and the bad, with the beautiful and the ugly, the majestic and the grotesque, etc., etc., you have to cut through those false memories again. You have to cut through the imposed stories or literalized symbols that we've been given over the course of our lives. And not, when I say lives, it's not just necessarily our lifetimes, but that we have acquired from even before we were born. We carry with us false memories that perhaps weren't even given to us directly, be it in indoctrination or education or so on and so forth. And so to really experience the organic and to really go into this journey that we're talking about, and that you've also mentioned, you call it the Gnostic journey or the Fool's journey or whatever name you want to give it, you really have to be able to admit something that we don't know, in the sense of I haven't yet at least understood how this works, which does not necessarily mean that I have to fill it in with a false memory. You understand? So if I do not know, I say I do not know. If I know, then I know because I have experience of it, right? And this is a distinction that this hermit is doing, right? He has the experience of that light. He has the experience of climbing that mountain, of reaching there, of having been awakened in the previous, journey. And when he reaches there, he wants to experience the organic. He is not interested anymore in false stories like the Hierophant was, right? The Hierophant was interested in all those stories and flashy clothes and all those externalized symbols and this kind of thing. This hermit is not interested in that. He wears gray robes, he doesn't care, right? But what he cares about is the organic. He wants to pierce through the veil and experience the organic. And to do that, it is absolutely essential that we do not fill in the gaps of what we don't know with things that are given to us. The origin, for example, of simulation theory came from what is now termed blanketly as Gnostic, but it was propelled by Theosophy. It was reinforced by Nag Hammadi, whose appearance of these scrolls is very suspicious. If you look at the story of how they supposedly were found, so pointing towards them being perhaps forgeries. But this was propelled immensely in the 20th century, culminating, of course, with the very famous Matrix movies that gave it, a more visual, appealing representation. But these are stories. These are not experience. Experience tells us that, for example, synchronicities are real, that magic in the world exists, magic, organic magic. Existence is magical. It tells us that there are impressive, incredible connections between people, and that people appear in our lives at the exact same moments, which could also be linked with synchronicities and with magic that I mentioned before. All of this is true, but how this process works, we do not know for sure. But we don't need to fill it in with what is given, right? Because it's like in the past, or not in the past, but when someone doesn't know, you go to a tribe in the whatever, Amazon or whatever, and you present them with your smartphone, right? They're going to say that God did it, or the gods, right? Oh, the gods came up with this device, this magical device, right? And it's not at all like that. They simply do not know and fill in the blanks that they don't know with a spectacular explanation, so that they don't have that hole in their perception. You understand? And so the Hermit is a card that really is important in that regard, because he is the discerner, the filter of what is true from what is false. And sorry about the rant, but it's been on my mind.
No, absolutely. And I mean, one way to really round off what you just said was, he is between the black and the white, hence why his cloak is grey.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So he's totally enshrouded with this. He's above the petty trappings of the world. And again, that, like what you were saying about simulation theory, even the influence of theosophy and some of these, let's be honest, disguised traps,
mm-hmm.
these really controlled opposition elements and agents, they're designed by the system to speak the language of platitudes and rhetoric. They do not want, and of course this is why guru and guruism took over as well within the 60s going forward, mm-hmm. Where they attempted to establish cults of personality, because they do not desire individual sublimation of the soul in this view of the spirit, because it takes you out of the world.
Yes.
And not in a very negative sense, not in a selfish sense, but it allows you to pierce the veil, to perforate the mask, the persona that the world puts up. If you can do that, psychological warfare really has no bearing upon you. It can't burden you. It can't control you. It can't steer you. So this is why they've tried to preempt all of this. Of course, like you've rightly stated that.
Yeah.
Where all of these, this is why we're seeing Gnostic elements in all of these films.
Of course.
is because they're attempting to steer the masses, to familiarize them with this, and put their own, weave their own flavor into the mix, so to say, which poisons the punch. So that, I mean, it's ultimately, systems of power cannot handle a very spiritually aware population. Hence
Absolutely.
why religions have always been at the forefront of civilization, because civilization is a means of human domestication, cannot work if that which is sought to be domesticated, humans in this sense, in civilization sense,
Yes.
if the humans are of a higher quality, of a quality that makes them either above or equal to the master, or the farmer, or the human rancher in this case.
Yes, absolutely. And civilization, as we saw again, going back to the chariot, civilization relies upon the taming of the egos, as we saw in those sphinxes. And when the egos awaken and they become hermits, then they become a threat. And at that point, for those that still have not awakened their egos, they provide external egos. So the cult of personality, like you mentioned, be it a guru, be it political figures, be it whatever, experts in this field or the other, they externalize and literalize those egos to be surrogates or replacements for what would necessarily and intrinsically be an internal authority, right? So absolutely agreed with you there. The intention here is to prevent that internal realization. Absolutely agreed, Silas there.
Yep.
I don't know if you at this point want to move to the other card, or if we could perhaps call the episode here, and the next card we can discuss already with Cupstar, hopefully. I don't know what you prefer to do, because you're going to have an interview shortly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah.
If we can wrap the episode up here, and then we'll start on the Wheel of Fortune.
Of course.
Next,
Yeah.
because I believe
we took a long
also,
time in the strength, so yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is associated with Jupiter, so I think
Mm-hmm.
Cubstar would have quite a lot to say upon that.
Mm-hmm.
Or from my understanding, at least, it's associated with Jupiter. So yeah, we can touch upon that with Cubstar. The 10th tarot card.
Yes. Okay. Well, very well. I think this was very, very productive, this episode. I mean, I think we've been doing really well with this series. I'm really happy with how we're going about this. I mean, like I say, your symbology explanations are top notch, and I try to counterbalance them because I have a different stance. You're the scholar, I'm the philosopher, so I try to counterbalance with my intuition, provide a different perspective on things. But I think that we've really been covering really good ground and bringing to the surface awareness of this symbology that, although it is true, it has been used in a skewed manner. I mean, we can't go, and beat around the bush about this. This has been used nefariously as well. There are a lot of elements of a true organic journey that we can extract from them, right? So I'm really happy with how this series is going, and I can't wait for us to record episode 5, hopefully with already Cupstar. He was supposed to be here, but he suddenly fell ill, so misfortune, one of those things. So thank you, Silas, for another episode. I don't know if
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great because the good thing is, when you begin to talk about these things, it's not necessarily that my interpretation or your interpretation is correct.
Correct. Yeah.
It's what you're doing, like Mercury, like chemical Mercury or alchemical Mercury in this sense, is you're creating ripples within the surface of the water, which is creating that glistening effect, which itself is conveying and relaying to the initiate, of which we all are. We are all initiates of life. Be us brown, black, yellow, green, whatever, or Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, whatever we're all initiates of life. It brings to us a certain type of impetus, a spiritual impetus, a psycho-spiritual impetus, which can perhaps allow us to parse some deep questions within ourselves that perhaps, or we bring them to the surface. Perhaps people were unaware of some of these questions, and it begins the kindling process, which is a very it's something that's quite dynamic in terms of how it affects the imagination and how it affects one's growth through their mind, through their thinking, even through their creativity, their creative actions. So all of it is good. It's all good.
Oh yeah, and even if we were entirely wrong in anything we've stated, we at least brought to the fore this for re-evaluation, right? And so each individual, that's what I always promote, for each individual to observe themselves and do the process themselves, walk the talk, not just listen to the talk or talk the talk, but walk it, and apply it in your life, in their lives, and see where it goes, because there is an organic journey underneath the veil, what is called the veil, right? There is an organic journey underneath all the madness that sometimes we see ourselves surrounded by, right? So absolutely essential to bring these things to the fore. All right, so
certainly.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. We've covered the Strength and the Hermit cards in this episode 4, and I hope to see you all here in episode 5. Thank you very much.